I'm Chuck Holloway. I'm a professor here at Stanford, and I'm going to let each one of the panelists introduce themselves. Amanda?
My name is Amanda Reed. I'm a partner at Palomar Ventures. We have offices in Irvine, Santa Monica, Palo Alto. We have about $500 million under management. We do early stage IT investing, not life sciences, not so much clean tech, classic IT and consumer investments. Prior to Palomar, I was an executive in residence where you're brought in and kept around to be a future executive or CEO of a portfolio company. I used to not understand why funds did that until I met series after series of founding teams that I would have just given my teeth to be able to find a CEO to drop in or the right engineer to drop in. So now I understand how talent is hard to piece together in a startup. Prior to that, I was in 5 startups in a row, all of them here in Silicon Valley. 2 IPOs, 2 acquisitions, and one just flame out in the dot-com bubble that was probably the most educational of all of them. So I supervised $90 million in venture capital becoming a black smoking hole. And after that happened, I thought I was really qualified to be a VC. So.
and Amanda didn't tell you, but she was in the sales and marketing area.
Right. My background is sales and marketing. The last company that I was part of the founding team of, I was brought in as the sales and marketing / adult supervision for a team of 5 engineers that had founded a company. And in 1999, they'd gotten funded by Kleiner Perkins and the famous 20 minutes for $5 million. 20-minute pitch, $5 million check, let's go build a company, meet her. And so I was part of that original Series A team that built and later exploded that company.
You're here to help.
Which makes Carl look like I'm here to help. So yeah, long history of being a founder and being an executive, and now I'm in the leisure life of the VC world, right, Carl?
Sure. So my name is Carl Showalter. I'm a founding and general partner of Opus Capital. We're based in Menlo Park. We're an early stage IT fund. We have about $1 billion under management. And basically, I've been in venture for the last 6 years. Before that, I was at a couple of companies, a couple of startups, one called Juniper Networks, where I was the VP of marketing. Before that, I was on the East Coast at a company called UUNet, which was a large internet service provider, was a general manager. Before that, America Online, back when it was known more like America on Hold in the mid-'90s. And I was at a startup before that was bought by America Online. In terms of the founding teams, because what we do is primarily seed and Series A funding, the teams that we get involved with are incredibly important. And there's lots of stories about, are there 2 founders, 3 founders, 4 founders, or 15 founders? And a lot of those dynamics are critical to ultimately the success of the company.
George.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is George Fernandez. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I stayed as a serial entrepreneur. Someday maybe I'll become a VC. I've done 5 companies, 3 of them, 2 IPOs, 1 M&A, and 2 are ongoing entities. I've become better and better at selecting my partners. My first introduction to partnership was my very first company, which actually did an IPO. I partnered with 3 brothers, and I was quickly introduced to genetics. There was a good, bad, and ugly partner.
These were not your brothers.
They were not my brothers.
It's your first lesson.
So from then on, it only went uphill because I got a little bit better. So I look forward to sharing some of my experiences on choosing partners, firing partners, and so forth.
Tony.
My name's Tony Levitan. After listening to that, I'm not really sure why I'm here. I'm on my 3rd startup with the same partner, so either I found the right one or I'm in a rut I can't figure out. And I just want to, as a word of caution, he really pissed me off this morning, so I think my comments today will be very honest and open. We do a company called Lexi, which is a new kind of mobile company. Our focus is on utilizing the phone's voice channel to bring a new kind of services, both to content providers and to consumers. And if we do this right, we'll fundamentally enrich how consumers collaborate and communicate using their phones. It's a big vision, and we're just figuring it out. We did a beta towards the end of the year and are retooling with some of the learning we got from that, and in the really fun stage, which means it's hard, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And if any of you guys saw the Gil's keynote this morning, there's a lot of that jello pushing that's going on right now. Fred and I previously did a company when we came out of the GSB together called eGreetings Network, which we took public and then was acquired. We took some time off, and in between those, I did a little golf company alone. So have some insights on the difference between working with a partner and going it alone. I'm mostly a marketing guy, having spent 5 years in Asia working for a Chicago-based ad agency called Leo Burnett, and now do a little bit of everything, much like you get to when you are an entrepreneur.
One of the things that Tony didn't mention is his title, and one of the issues you have when you have a partner is titles, right? Who's the CEO, what the title of other people might be. In all of his company, his title has been Creator of Chaos. So that tells you a little bit about Tony's role in these partnerships.
Well, and Fred's, because Fred's is the creator of Substance. So it's a little yin and yang action going on.
So what we're going to do here is we're going to try to spend the first half an hour or so with a set of questions that we think you will all be interested in, and then turn it over to you. And I want to start with the two guys at the end. I'll start with you, Tony. And the first question is sort of why did you look for a partner? In other words, when you started this, you had the option of doing it yourself, but why did you look for a partner?
I think the answer to that has changed. With the first venture, I looked for a partner because I basically didn't believe that I was fundable. And I'm a very social person, so the idea of working alone didn't attract me. But frankly, when Freddie and I were first at the GSB and we were founding the ideas that eventually would become eGreetings, part of our belief was that Fred was a little bit fundable and I was completely unfundable. But together, we were a nice package. So we actually were attracted to each other as entrepreneurs, mostly because we had an entrepreneurial mindset, but also because of some externalities. We were both on the geriatric side of our class. Fred a little more geriatric than I. And so a lot of the paths that typically you come out of business school weren't very interesting to us. And that was the first thing that started our exploration, both individually and together. So we worked together during the summer between our first year, ostensibly to see how we would be as business partners. We started a little consulting firm called Summer Associates, better known to our clients as Some Asses. And then during our second year, we did a bunch of classes together. We did 360s together. And it was all focused on recognizing the value of the partnership. The second time around, it wasn't that uncertainty. After what we went through with eGreetings, I was a lot more confident in my ability to lead a company and secure funding. But I also started to look more at the value of having a partner. In an early stage company, no matter how flat you try to make it, you have no peers. And one of the things that I really appreciate is having a peer in the company. And in fact, we take that so that when we hire, we often think of filling slots in the company and ensuring that that person also has a peer with whom he or she can work through the issues that we're dealing with every day. So Fred covers my downside, I cover his. He helps me grow, I help him grow. And that seemed like a lot that I could settle into a second time as well.
George, you pick one of your companies, or all of them. Just give us a perspective of why you looked for a partner and why you continue to look for a partner.
So my perspective is I strongly believe on having at least one partner and maybe 2 or 3 more, because chances are you'll fire one of them. So you want to have somebody else around.
These are not equal partners.
It's varied. It's varied in terms of, but definitely some sort of partner, a substantial partner to take ownership so that they participate. The reason I've come to that conclusion, even though I've had terrible and good and medium experiences, because I've started companies in completely different markets. I started a company in the video games market, one in the biotech market, and one in the .com, and then one in the credit card market. And with a technical degree, there's no possible way I would know anything about those markets. So my previous company, Vivotech, where we developed and changed the credit card market, my knowledge of the credit card industry was I knew how to use a credit card. So I borrow the personality, the credibility, and the connections of my partner. And that's the only way I could have started that company. So from that standpoint, it's always been very, very positive. And I look for that now that as I move forward and as I start new companies. If I decide to start something in a completely different market, I know I can always look for a partner to fill in kind of the examples that Tony was describing, filling in the weak sides that you know or maybe you don't know, but you need to know. So I look for that, and then I quickly have to make a decision if that person is going to fill in or not. And I find that that's one of the most important parts is determining, okay, this partner is no longer being part of the process. And that takes a lot of ranges. My favorite one is you start a company, you have an idea, you realize that somebody already has that idea or that you're too early in the market, and you got a partner that was going to help you with that idea. All of a sudden, that partner has no value on the next idea. So having come to from that environment as well, you have to always be very keen on the partner. But all in all, my experience has always been very, very positive, and I recommend it. And I'll give you more details, but overall, that's my position on the partnership.
So from the two of you, it sounds like from a sort of personal point of view, you realize that there were limitations, things that you needed to have, markets, ability to be fundable, that kind of thing. Let's step back and talk a little more generically about partnerships and what are the advantages of partnerships, and then we'll talk about what some of the disadvantages of partnerships. Now, these two individuals here are both in partnerships. However, they're not the kind of partnerships that we're going to talk about today, and they have asked not to talk about their VC partners.
On video.
On
videotape. So, because they would embarrass them with all the good things they'd say, and it would take too long.
Right, it would. The effusive praise.
Right. So,
Reverence.
so let's start with Carl. So, generically, what do you see as an investor as the advantages of having a set of partners?
Well, so when I look at seed and Series A deals, I like there to be generally more than one founder. And for all the reasons that these gentlemen spoke about, someone to bounce ideas off of, a teaming, and so forth. And it may be a senior and a junior partner, maybe two equal partners. Those are all different, ways to structure it. What I find more complicated, though, is when 2 becomes 4 becomes 8. It's pretty difficult to sort of have a partnership, whether it's a venture firm or whether it's a startup company, where you have 5, 6, 7, 8 partners, because you have to deal with the split of the equity. You have to deal with who's going to be what role. You have to recognize that it's unclear that if 5 friends start a company together, that they're all 5 the best people for this company for the long term, which means over some period of time, some may stay, some may leave, expectations get difficult. And so my preference is somewhere around 2 or 3. But I think having more than one is a good thing in terms of sort of the give and take, yin and yang, discussions that have to happen when you're trying to do something crazy like start an early stage company.
Man.
I think one of the big advantages to partnerships, well, first of all, I think an entrepreneurial partnership in a pre-funded company or in an early stage company has got to be one of the most difficult artificial constructs to create, manage, and balance. I mean, we're in partnerships. Partnerships, by definition, don't work like those of us who've had normal job experience where there's a hierarchical reporting structure. There's a lot of comfort and structure in that. And partnerships, by definition, are incredibly challenging. So finding partners where you really think they've got mutual respect for each other, you can smell it after enough years of reviewing deals. You can look to see how they're getting along. I've had people describe partnerships as, like marriage without the love. It's not dissimilar. And when
I can give up my love?
I was going to ask you about your repeat kind of, your partnership. Sounds like I'd love to back any team that has that kind of experience, or any VC probably would jump on that in a second.
I have a term sheet in my pocket.
She's got a pen.
Carl and I will arm wrestle for it after the session. So I think one of the advantages of partnerships are complementary skill sets. What's hard is when you see 2 or 3 people who have got really a lot of significant overlay in their backgrounds and their experience and their perspective. When you really get complements, when you get the classic business person and the technologist, or the domain expert and the business leader and the technologist, that's just a great setup. And it's always interesting to me to see how people choose who their partners are, because if you can really get not only complementary domain, but real mutual respect and some period of time of really working together and really thinking through the hard issues, that's a great situation to be able to get behind.
Okay, so let's open this up a little bit more and think about not only the advantages from the point of view of the investor and why the two of you guys decided to start with partners, but in general terms, so what are the benefits other than just the fact that you have complementarity and several things that you mentioned in terms of peer relationships and that kind of thing? But what other benefits have you found from having a partnership? And let me start with George.
So my formula today is I try to start with 3 partners. One that knows the market, one that comes with cash, and then me that will spend the money and come up with a vision. That's my basic model. And I think the advantage is pretty straightforward. And surprisingly, there are people that have money and are happy to fund an idea because they themselves don't have an idea and don't have the experience. And then there's people that know the market and are so afraid to step out of the box for that particular market. They've been doing the same thing, following the same rules, that they've lost the spirit of, what if I was to do something slightly different? And they kind of need a little help. And then there's somebody like Tony and myself say, well, you just do something different, let's try it. And I find that model to work really, really well. Over time, some partners will continue to support, and typically the first partner that's adding the money, that's one of the first partners that leaves the relationship, if you will, because now you start getting angel investors, you start getting VC investment, and you don't need that partner anymore. And so the partnership evolves, but the evolution is based on the value that each person is adding in each of the areas. Every day when you get to the office, and especially early on when it's maybe just 2 or 3 people and then the next set of people, you want to bounce the ideas off somebody. You want to have, if you've had a bad call with a VC, you want to have somebody there to share how incompetent the VCs are. You want to have that heart-to-heart that otherwise you wouldn't have, because you don't have somebody you can just call and say, this customer is totally out of their mind because they're not buying our product. And so partners feel that part of the relationship and can be very, very useful. And I'm sure some of you are thinking of starting a company or have started and are dealing with the issue of the partnership. The ones that I typically, when people come to me and when I do things like this, I always find 2 technical people coming to me and say, hey, George, what do you think you should do with our partners? And I look at the 2 technical people and I immediately know one of them is not going to last very long because there will be lots and lots of conflicts at the beginning. So try to get somebody that complements each of the key areas and goes forward at a big level.
Tony?
I think the thing that I really appreciate is that one of the challenges of the early stage is the up and down ride. So we used to actually, when people would get hired at e-greetings, we haven't done this at Lexi yet, we would give them a toothbrush and dental floss. That was the dental plan. And then we'd give them a strip of Dramamine for basically the nausea of the up and down. And what having a partner for me does is it helps manage that a lot better. So, and it's not just managing it for me personally, it's managing it for the organization. We're really big in our relationship on showing up authentically, and I want to be able to show up authentically in my company overall. So if I'm alone and I'm concerned about that bad call and the impact it's going to have on the people around me, I may make a choice to kind of gloss over that and just put on a happy face so that the others who are working in the company, that they think, well, everything is okay. And maybe it's not. And what the benefit of the partner provides for me is I can be more authentic because I know that there's balance going to be created. Invariably, Freddie and I will kind of ride like this because our personalities are different and our experiences are different enough that we really do get to enjoy that teeter-totter of going up and down. So when he's having a hard time, I'm often in the flow of something and he'll get caught in the drag and then get pulled out, and vice versa. So that value of the relationship Amanda's talking about, it really is like a marriage. I spend way more time with Fred than I do with my wife. I'm reminded of that often. And it creates a lot of value, it creates a lot of challenge, And I think that ability is one of the things that I really appreciate.
So if we open it up a little bit more broadly, anything else you want to add in terms of the advantages you see as VCs to partnerships? You gave us a number, but anything else, Amanda?
I think that if you look at the difference between George's experience and Tony's experience, George talks about the transience of
Right.
partnerships and how partners come in and out of your life as
Right.
the company grows. And I think that's probably more typical of what we see. It's very unusual for us to see two partners that found three companies in a series together, which is why, as I said, it's a very attractive proposition, because partnership issues can undo an early stage company. It's not, I don't know if I'd rank it as the leading cause of failure, but it's certainly up there. And so I think it's interesting if you look at the contrast between the two on how you view it going in. So I think unless you've known someone a long time, when you're putting together a partnership with the company, you have to almost anticipate that there's going to be some turnover and transition. And it's very important, I think, to try to be, as I think authentic is a great word, with each other and with your investors about how it's going, because we see transitions more often than not.
Right.
And managing that from the venture perspective is I've seen multiple, I would call high-profile divorces among partners in the middle of funding rounds, shortly after funding rounds, after IPOs. It's like divorce of marriages. It's the more common occurrence than it is that you see people who've been married 80 years.
I want to come back to that, but Carl, anything else on advantages that
Yeah, I mean,
we ought to highlight?
Say something nice about partnerships.
it's very rare, even though sometimes founders feel otherwise, that one person can do it all. And these guys have talked about the fact that there's this balance, there's this give and take. There's also this perspective that's provided from somebody other than yourself who can sort of help you see things through a different lens. And so having that complementary view is incredibly important. I also think it's important as you think about a startup and as it grows, so much of the culture gets set by the founders, and having multiple perspectives on that and multiple experiences to blend together to get a really good culture for the company, I think is better than if somebody sort of dictates, I am the founder, I am the boss, I am the king, this is the way everything will be done. That's generally not as healthy an environment.
And if we sort of transition to some of the problems, Carl, one of the things that you mentioned to me was that you see this breakup in terms of culture as one of the big downsides, one of the things that are very difficult. You see it often. Tell us a little bit more about that, and what kinds of things have you seen done to manage that kind of thing?
So I won't name the company, but I've been involved with a company which had two very strong-minded founders, one who was marketing and one who was incredibly technical. But they got together because they both saw the opportunity at a similar time, but they couldn't have been more different people. And to the extent that one of them viewed the fact that the startup was about working 23.9 hours per day and sleeping 0.1 hours per day for N years. The other one had two small kids and a wife who expected him to be home occasionally. And that tension really built over time until there ended up being a divorce between the two of them. Now, it was managed and it turned out to be okay and the company did fine, but it wasted a bunch of energy in the company that if you think about a startup has generally a very small window of opportunity. They're going after something very pointed, and if you waste a bunch of energy on things such as this, you lose traction, or you have opportunity costs that you've lost because of the process. And so the lesson from this for me was, even though these were two great guys who were both fundable, they should have spent a little bit more than the 2 or 3 months they did together to get to know each other before they started the company. And I should have been a better investor and sort of forced that. I mean, it was to the fact that one of them lived in Silicon Valley and one of them lived in Southern California. And the one in Southern California commuted up for the company. And so it became this sort of difficult challenge, although I'm supposed to say positive things.
No, we're talking.
But it was one of those things where
we're talking about the downside.
Those dynamics are critical. And so know your partner. I mean, if you look at Tony, as Amanda said, if we can find people who've worked with the same, gone through battle test multiple times with somebody, that's an incredible relationship. But we don't see that as much. And so what we're really looking for is, have they spent enough time together thinking about this and working out some of the difficult issues up front and being authentic with each other up front, so that when the proverbial bad news hits the fan, there's there's a way for them to react that is rational as opposed to nonlinear.
So, Amanda, you started talking about high-profile divorces and things like that. So, what are some of the things that you've had to go through, and how have you coped with it as an investor in these high-profile divorces? And what any more insights into what the causes might have been?
One of my favorite stories about this is a CEO and a tech founder, classic, guy happened to be from HBS, but the classic HBS guy and his tech co-founder. And they actually got the company all the way through an IPO. The stock was trading at like an all-time high. And the CEO, the guy who became the CEO, decided that he just had enough of the CTO's kind of work style or whatever. So he shoves him out of the company. I mentioned the fact that stock was at an all-time high. So the guy has to exercise all the stock. And his wife, smart woman, being married to an entrepreneur, insists that they pay cash for their house. They just pay off their mortgage, and they pocket the other, I don't know, it's probably about $10 million. The company then goes through this horrible downturn. Everybody who's still part of the management team can't sell their stock. They ride it all the way into the ground. The CEO, who was the high flyer, I'm sure he's been on numerous panels here, because it's a really high-profile story. He ends up having to sell his house to pay off the depreciation on his jet, right? And so this is absolutely a true story. And the moral of that story is sometimes a divorce is not so bad for the guy that gets kicked out, right? It just depends on, it can be, as my dad said to me in numerous, breakups, sometimes it's better to be out of a relationship that's not working. Right. So I think the challenge with going through that process as an investor is, there are a lot of strong feelings of loyalty and disloyalty, and it's like you wake up in the middle of a soap opera when you're trying to build a company. Right. And one of the things that I think is the hardest, that I'm sure Carl has experienced, is you can also be held hostage by loyalties. As an investor, you can have three founders who are so tight that when one of them is really not effective in their position and the board is trying to get his buddy to move him out of the job, somebody's got to be the CEO. And you're trying to get this guy that you've been through all the pre-funding startup days with, all the war stories, and trying to maintain some objectivity about those relationships, I think, is incredibly hard. There are personal loyalties here, and yet I've also had situations, so that guy needed to be moved out. The CEO said over my dead body, and you're locked down, and it keeps the company from moving forward. Conversely, I was just in a situation, past 2 years, where the CEO really needed to transition to an experienced company builder, right. And we felt that if
neither of the partners fit that.
Well, and we felt if we moved him out, we would lose the VP of engineering and the CTO, which would have taken the whole engineering team with them, and we were locked in. And so this is a really bad situation, because while I respect the relationship between the three guys, they couldn't see through, maybe it's the evil VCs trying to keep the company going the way we thought it should, but that dynamic can be very challenging. So while it's also hard to build loyalty, it's hard to cultivate a sense of objectivity about the company's progress in a way that truly tests personal relationships, where people have spent the hours burning the midnight oil. It's a very, I look for partners and founders who are close, but not too close. Certainly getting involved with three blood brothers would be a challenge. Husband and wife teams, these things are fraught with peril, and when I see them, red flags light up everywhere. I almost do everything I can to avoid them. They're very prone to problems as a company grows.
So let me ask Tony and George sort of a follow-on to that. Inevitably, they're going to be, if you have a successful company, even if you don't have a successful company, there are going to be challenges where one partner is going to be doing something that might make it difficult for the other partner. There are going to be tensions, and there are going to be VCs that come in and put pressure on you to do things that you might prefer not to do. Now, from a point of view of a partner, of an entrepreneur with a partner, do you feel stronger in the dealing with the VCs where things are not going well? One of you might have to step down, somebody else might have to come in, or does that make it more difficult? Now, let me start with Tony.
I hope Fred will be happy in his retirement. I think one of the commitments we made before we decided to do another company is we spent time together talking about how we were different today than we were when we did e-greetings, because there was quite a gap. We learned a lot during that process, and we thought a lot about what each of us wanted to do going forward. And these are conversations that you need to have before you start, because once the tension kicks up, it's hard to take the time to do it. The other thing we do to try to maintain our bond and perspective is we have a meal together at least once a week. So we get out of the office, we get out of the phone calls, we get away from, it's a little hard to get Fred to put his Pearl away, but I get him away from his email and I put my BlackBerry away, and we just talk. Sometimes we just talk about us, and sometimes we talk about the issues. We've had interactions with investors who will, it seems kind of purposely look to see where we are in that tension that Amanda and Carl were talking about how tight we are and how we could be broken apart. So what we try to keep is a healthy perspective that differentiates between us as friends and longtime business partners and us as in our roles as driving Lexi to market. And I think that perspective right now, at least, has been very helpful, because the tension moments that have come up have allowed us to talk about it in a way that is on multiple levels. So we can talk about the strategic, we can talk about the emotional, and we can talk about the impact on each of us going forward. We haven't really been challenged. No one has come in and said, hey, I'm ready to give you guys $10 million, but one of you has to leave. We haven't had that situation yet. We didn't have it before. We haven't had it yet. I don't know that it's not going to come in the future. I guess what I do believe, though, is that we'll be as ready for it as we possibly can be. I don't think you can ever be ready for something like that. But I think we'll be as ready for it as we possibly could be based on the work we've been doing to date.
Tony, you've said a little bit about what you should look for, at least what you looked for in a partner. And you just said a little bit about how you would prepare yourselves and also yourself for being in this partnership relationship. Anything else that you think that you ought to tell this assembled group about managing over the years and how, because companies go through phases.
Yep.
And once you get the product out and you start getting revenue, then things change. Once you begin to think about a public financing, things change. Anything else about keeping partnerships together as you go through these phases?
Well, I think the two commitments for us, Professor, are around open communication and honoring differences. When Fred and I got started, we actually had the experience that Carl was talking about. When we came out of the GSB, my older son showed up the break between winter and spring of our second year. And Fred had a viable company that his wife was running. So when we were founding the precursor to e-greetings, he had cash flow, and I was trying to figure out how to use diapers inside and out, which is not a happy experience. And so that tension that these guys were talking about was very much there. What sustained us through that was our communication around the issues and the openness with which we approach those. So for those of you who are students here, I couldn't give you a stronger endorsement for taking touchy-feely. I think it's one of the greatest things that's been part of my life, and I highly recommend it. And we both sign up for that. It's a big part of our culture. It's a big part of our hiring. But the other thing is to recognize that we're not interchangeable. We're not the same. I have two kids. Fred doesn't. I live down on the peninsula. He lives in Mill Valley. We have different connections to the other things that are important in our lives, although they go in the back seat when you're doing a startup. And so rather than try to wipe those differences away, what we try to do is step into them and support each other through them. So I think those are the things that I'd look for as part of the preparation. And again, I said this before, I'll hit it again. I think you got to do a lot of this work earlier in the process than later, because it's hard to take time once the tension starts to amp. It's really hard to take time away to start to address things that you really needed to talk about before the tension showed up.
So George, what about you? Is it easier to have a partner or not have a partner when you're getting the pressure from the VCs? And as you go through these various changes in the company, how do you manage through this?
So I've actually had term sheet where it says on the term sheet that XY partner has to leave before this term sheet is valid, which is okay. I mean, my experience is very, very different than Tony. I go into a partnership knowing that, in fact, I'm probably going to start having a pre-divorce paperwork, knowing that we will get divorced and one of us will stay and one of us will go on. And it just depends on there are a number of factors, and clearly VCs are right up there in encouraging that to happen for a good reason. So I would answer the question differently if somebody's doing the company for the first time versus somebody that's done it 2, 3, 4 times, that in some ways can appreciate that if you have a VP of marketing or even a CEO that's just not carrying the ball forward, imagine you've worked very, very hard for 2 years, used diapers both ways. We've all done the same way as entrepreneurs. And then all of a sudden the company hits a patch where it's not moving forward. So it's a disservice to the team, disservice to the investors not to make that decision. But as a first-time entrepreneur, it's very, very hard, and you get a lot of pressure, and your loyalty is clearly to the person that you've spent years and years working together. But sooner or later, somebody reminds you about cash flow. When you look at and you don't have payroll to do next month, you then all of a sudden those decisions become a little easier to make. The loyalty breaks up a little bit, and it's a question of, okay, are you going to get the money? Are you going to get the next customer to make payroll or not? And so there's things that come about as part of the startup that in many ways help the emotional component. That's always been my experience, with the exception of the 3 brothers, which was one of the most difficult parts, where 2 of them clearly were not carrying the ball. And yet, and I needed a 3rd one because the 3rd one was very good, and he and I really complemented each other to start the company and grow the company. And you just couldn't break them up. I mean, how would you go tell a brother, by the way, your 2 other brothers missed a couple of genes? You don't, but it came down to payroll, right? And eventually the 2 brothers had to move on, and interestingly enough, I had to move on as part of the deal so that the family wouldn't look bad. But luckily, I was in the same situation where, because the company was public, I was able to sell my shares, and they wrote the shares down to 0. So don't feel bad if you get kicked out. I think that's the message both from the VCs. Don't feel the emotion of saying, boy, I helped that start and so on and so forth, and now I'm out. I must be a bad person. You may just cash out and have all the cash. And then look back and say, you know what, thank you. But you would never say that when you were going through that emotional ups and downs, and there's pressures all over every day, and people won't give you money, people won't join the team. But then later you'll look back. So that's why I think the answer for that question is really a 2-part answer for the very, very first timers, and those have done a couple times and maybe are looking for some pointers to improve upon. Is the first time is much more emotional, but either way, it's worked out well for me.
So, Carl and Amanda, anything you'd like to add in terms of characteristics of sort of managing through these difficult times that you think you'd like to see in the partners that you fund?
I think most of it's been said from our perspective. Just open communication, some experience with each other, and understanding that at the end of the day, it's not personal, it's business, and just try to sort of keep it as objective as possible, which is nearly an impossible assignment. I understand that. But just keep in mind that there are some very, very famous people in the Valley who were founders of very, very famous companies who left those companies relatively early and went on to tremendous success in other enterprises. And so there's not the stigma of sort of whether you're a part of it or whether you're not that you might expect. And so a lot of it is how the founders themselves communicate and how they handle these difficult decisions sort of make them, over their lifetimes, more and more fundable.
Yeah, 3 sort of very quick points on that. To Tony's point, I think, well, I would expect any agreement between founders to be disclosed to me if I'm looking at investing in a company. I think writing down really writing down, this is the lifestyle I want to have, or this is the lifestyle I want to have, so that you've got some sort of reference document, because you think you know somebody. I mean, partnerships and business are reflections of personal relationships in business. You can see how someone is in relationships. They tend to be kind of consistent, I think. And when I joke and say it's about marriage without the love, I think it's important to make sure you know what you want to get. Just like you'd sit down if you were getting married and say, do you want to have kids? Do you want to live in the suburbs? Do you want to live in the city? You want to sit down with your founders, your co-founders, and say, how, to the point about how hard are we working? How many hours are we putting in? What's going to be important to us? Where are we going to keep our priorities straight? Those are constructive documents. Documents that say, even if you guys kick Joe to the curb, he gets 50% of the company in perpetuity, are not helpful for future financings. I think that the last point is don't count on VCs to give you feedback about your partners, right? One of the very most last things that a VC will do is say, you're really bright, Tim, but Ellen has to go. And the reason is Ellen is likely to go out and found another company. And if Ellen finds out that I'm the one that put the finger on her as saying she's just not talented, she may go out, get a great co-founder, and have a company that I really want to fund. This has actually happened to me before. When I made the transition from entrepreneurship to VC, I was a little overly honest in what I thought about some situations, and that came back to haunt me when the people who I thought were not well teamed ended up doing some fairly interesting companies that they weren't that fond of me after that. So the rule of thumb in the venture business is, we're not interested in the sector, it's a little early for us, come back in your B round. What you don't do is take two guys who've been slaving away nights for a year and say, have you thought about breaking up? It's not really, if you're not going to do the deal when they're together, it's kind of, I've found out, not a smart thing to do. So I've seen deals not get done, and it's as obvious to everybody who they've pitched that there's a problem with one of the founders, and nobody's going to say anything. And I think that that's not what people expect, and it's definitely more true than not. If you've got a term sheet where you said so-and-so's out, that's a very aggressive, I really want to back George, and so I'm not going to let this deal go. But usually, you can just make call strikes as you want in the venture business. I don't have to fund eBay as long as I do Google. Right? So I can let these things go by all the time.
Right. Okay, let's open it up to the audience here in the back.
Thank you. This is such a wonderful conversation for me. I sole founded a company 3 years ago in the consumer web space, and I'm still a sole founder. I've been bootstrapping it with contractors. I put a team together a year and a half ago. My co-founder, CTO, director, and consultant who wore 4 hats. And I didn't have a productive relationship, so we went through a difficult 6-month separation. And now here I am, again, working with contractors, and my background is not software. I couldn't write a line of code to save my ass. And so what we have is a great business model. We have a skeleton in terms of our software. And we have a sole founder. And I've gone through a couple of friends and family rounds, and now our lawyers have suggested that we do a bridge financing. Because I don't think that VCs are going to be that interested, as I think Carl pointed out, in a sole founder situation. And frankly, I wouldn't be sitting on the other side of the table either, coming from a banking background and being on the other side of the table. So I guess my question to you is, do you think I should try to approach VCs to fill out this bridge round to an institutional, or should I really just focus on angel investors and perhaps a few strategic partners who I'm talking to who may not be as sophisticated in terms of how they look at the execution side?
Well, since I think they probably don't have enough information to answer that question directly, let me rephrase a little bit.
Okay.
Would you be, without a partner, are there funding sources that are more likely to be available to you than they would be if you had a partner?
I would bifurcate the issue here. It's not about how many partners are in the company. It's about your skill set relative to what the next important milestones are in your company.
Sure.
So if what you've got to do is actually build out the code and you don't write code, I mean, the thing about partnerships that I didn't mention is if you kick your partner to the curb, getting a CTO into a company or you can recruit a VP of engineering, someone who runs the trains on time, right? But tech visionaries aren't like, it's like prospecting for customers. There isn't an SIC code for them, right? You can't just go find them unless you know them. So they can be incredibly significant to all development stages of a company, and we almost regret when you lose these guys because it's hard to put the heart and soul of a tech vision back into a business. You can't really inject it easily at later stages of the business. So I think, to answer your question directly about VCs don't bridge deals typically. We bridge our own deals, but that's not really a planned event, right? So what you're talking about is you either need to go find somebody who can complement you and manage this process, and then you could possibly go get VC funding. I think angel funding, maybe somebody who's willing to back you on the premise that what you're going to do with that money is get some time to go find someone, is probably a better bet.
So it's not so much whether there's a formal partnership, but
It's not the number of partners.
whether they've covered that.
Right, it's domain experience. The big issue with partnerships fundamentally is not how many they are, it's how close each individual is to the ideal description for the job if you were going to go out and look through the whole valley. And I mean, most partnerships that I'm on, one of the people who's on the next panel is someone I'm co-invested with. We took a look at the three founders. We both immediately could guess which one of these guys was still going to be on the team in 3 years because he was the closest fit to who you'd go hire. Right? You knew the other guys were going to kind of get the company on its feet. And you knew at some point they were going to leave. They didn't know that, but we could see it. You know, it's not about numbers. It's about are you the world-class best at doing this company? And is the person you're co-founding with a great developer, a great engineer, a great marketer, a great CEO? So I think you need to fill that in before you look for venture funding. And if you can get an angel to back you in the interim, so much the better.
And that was my point earlier about 4 or 5 founders. I wasn't as crisp as Amanda, but it's unlikely that there are 5 people that start a company where in 2 or 3 years, those are the top 5 people in each of those positions who could possibly be there. And that's and the mistakes as made many times by those 5 people is they split the equity evenly among them, and that leads to lots of questions when the obvious things start to happen because some scale and some don't.
Other questions? Over here.
Equity question is something I've been thinking about, and how does what is the best way to structure these partnerships? I mean, you talk about evenly splitting the equity. If you know the money guys are going to be out soon enough, how can you shape that so that their portion is relative to their contribution to the firm?
That's something you ought to do very carefully, and you get a good lawyer. Get a really good startup specific lawyer. There are a bunch of top guys at all the major firms, whether it's Cooley or Orrick or Wilson or whomever, who specialize in trying to find guys like you and do some pro bono work with you before you're funded. Onboard yourself into those programs, right? And get someone to help you structure this. Get some advice. People like Carl and I will do, talk to the VC sessions with like the Software Developers Forum and stuff like that, where you can go in and get a half hour of just advice. I could, give you some tips on how to structure that. Make sure that you anticipate someone's long-term contribution against their equity, right, at the time, and get some balance to it. To Carl's point, democracy is great, but it can also create problems.
So, George, let me ask you to wade in here and talk about how you structure partnerships.
I have a couple startup business models. I'm going to patent a few of them, and this particular area of how you structure your capital structure is one of them. Because, see, the difficulty I have when I'm putting a team together, including myself, is maybe the VCs, by the time they come in, they have a crystal ball, and they say, A is not going to be right. And at that point, you have more information that maybe allow your crystal ball to be correct. Where I'm starting a company, my crystal ball is not as clear. So for me to say, well, partner A should be 10% and 15%, it's not as obvious at that point. And as I mentioned earlier, if the market changes, you could think that partner A was not that good a contributor, and all of a sudden it becomes your star player. So what I try to do is I try to have a broader capital structure, and it's one that VCs like, which is think beyond just the initial founding team. Think beyond just, okay, let's split equally. Think beyond and say, okay, well, if we were going to get a couple rounds of funding, how much are we going to give up for that? If we're going to be here for 4 years, how are we going to vest this over a period of time? So put all those things in place, because what allows to happen is if you have that structure in place and partners B and C are not participating, the structure itself works itself out, and somebody has not vested fully over the 4 years, or somebody has not lasted for the first year and therefore get nothing. So I look at it as a little more complicated, because it is at a very, very early stage for anyone to claim that, okay, I know exactly what's going to happen. If they did, that means you don't have to go get money, because you know exactly what's going to happen, and you keep it all. The reason you get money is you want somebody else to take the risk. and share the risk.
There's an exact description right there.
And so think about that. And I think the attorney, especially here in the Valley, I think it's a little bit easier to do that now, in that it's pretty well understood the structure that makes a founding team work together in the long term, and those that stay get rewarded, and those that move on have a little bit of the action, but not be an impediment to growth. So, that's a little bit of my patent formula. I can't tell you the rest.
There's at least a panel a quarter on that subject somewhere in Silicon Valley about funding structures.
I'm curious from your experience, what's worked or what's gone wrong between two partners, one who's taken on the bulk of the risk, say been working on the venture for a year or longer, and then matches up with somebody, he's a couple of years out of the business world and young, partnering with somebody that has a lot of experience, more, say, from an executive background, where they have that execution background, that's good skills, but there's a certain dynamic. They have a lower risk profile coming from more in the corporate arena versus someone who took on all that risk. Just curious what has worked in terms of bridging that issue or dealing with that. One of which is just the question of how do you value the different equity.
So you have two very different things. One of them is somebody who's actually spent time, built whatever the product is, or and taken risk. And then you have somebody who's coming in that adds a dimension. It's pretty hard to get these all headed in the same direction to know how to value them.
Yeah.
Okay? Anybody want to?
Let me take that. Usually it's market value. Like, let me see if I understand the question correctly. Is you've already started. You want to bring somebody in that has corporate experience and add a lot to the value. How much do you give to them? And it's market value. I find it time and time again that it's not so much, okay, well, that person deserves 10%. It's the formula that I have is, okay, how much money, and I think somebody mentioned earlier in the panel, what is your expectation 3 years down the road? So let's say you stay at your job, and you're going to make $500,000 a year. So you go through that calculation. Say if you did what you're doing, you end up with a cash flow in your home of a couple $100K in 3 years. If you work with us, and I can show you a plan to get $2 million, that good enough? Well, a person may say no. They may say $4 million. And they have to work backwards in terms of if you go IPO in 3 years, what is that value today? And those people coming from a corporate world will understand that, and I've successfully done it that way, as opposed to focusing on the percent. I think everybody gets caught up on, I own 10%, I own 1%. And I have good stories on making a lot of money owning 1%, and good stories making a lot of money owning 60% of the company. But I found it's more driven by 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road, what is this person's expectation of their lifestyle? And if you can show a roadmap that if they get 100,000 shares, independent of the percent, that's going to get there, I found that that's worked for me.
So, Tony, you're talking about the market approach. So there's a touchy-feely approach to this, too. So say something about the touchy-feely aspect of this.
Well, I think there's, one of the things that Fred and I never do is, so we, eGreetings, we were equal partners. And on this one of us had the idea a little bit earlier and started working on it earlier. So we decided that that person should have a 10% kicker. So it wasn't a 50-50 split. And you know what? It's done. It doesn't come up in conversations, right? I got 10% more equity than you do, therefore I'm more right. So for me, I think George's approach is a really good one in that it anchors someone to what their expectations and needs are. I mean, granted, it's all crystal ball kind of stuff, right? Who knows where we're going to be in 3 years? But we all come in with expectations, and I think aligning those is the good thing to do. And I think the challenge with, as Professor Holloway asked, the touchy-feely approach is how do you surface all the stuff that gives you data in order to do that? Because, boy, there's a lot of covert information in around what my lifestyle choices are and what my expectations are that somehow you have to find a way to surface.
So, go ahead.
Just one point to that. I think you ought to think about, does every resource you meet need to be a full-time employee of the company and a partner, right? So I think we could loosen up the definition of partnerships here and talk about entrepreneurs who've built advisory panels to great success, where they're really the center of the company, they're putting their heart and soul into it, and when you meet people who have got a lot of domain experience, a lot of industry experience, a lot of something kind of experience that brings something to the party, consider giving them some option grant, right? And keeping them in the loop, meet with them once a week, once a month, and give them enough stock and from an option perspective that you're compensating them for that without asking someone who's got a mortgage and 3 kids to quit their job and come in and engage with you full time. Because the stress levels between that, I mean, that's why it's great to do startups sort of right out of business school, is because the less you have at stake, the more risk you're willing to take, and the more you're likely to find people who've got sort of similar risk profiles. That's probably the biggest stressor in partnerships, are different risk profiles. So if you can find a way to draw these people in, I funded individual entrepreneurs with like 23 advisors. Now, conversely, be very careful about taking unqualified investors as equity investors, right? That's a big problem for VCs. If someone's not qualified to be an investor, according to the government, you can't just take money from everybody. We're always going back and cleaning things up, where every angel represents a potential lawsuit to us in future financings if they're either not truly qualified or got in under the wrong kind of legal structure or what have you. So I'm talking about advisors in the option standpoint, option holders of the company. I'm not talking about people who put equity in, which you need to be very careful about. But you can throw option stock around pretty freely if you're really thinking you're getting value from people. That might be much easier than trying to manage your 2 different profiles on the company.
There's one other perspective that I might add here, and that is, because I've seen a number of cases very much like this, where somebody has really worked on creating a business concept, and they want to bring somebody in who actually has stature, and part of this is dealing with your ego. And one of the remarks that Vinod Khosla, who, as you know, started Sun Microsystems and is now a partner at Khosla Ventures after having been a partner at Kleiner Perkins for many years, always says is, he says, what you're doing at this position of the company is trying to increase the probability of success, not trying to maximize the size of your pie. And I think that's good advice when you're starting to think about what you're trying to do and how you're trying to keep your share versus other shares. Right over here.
Yeah. IPOs seem to be a lot more rare these days, and companies seem to be acquired at earlier stages. How does that affect things?
They're great.
Cash out early?
You keep a bigger percent of your company, you cash out earlier, and you reduce your risk to 0. So as an entrepreneur, and I'm sure for a VC, it's an exit. You always want to get to $1 billion valuation and go to a cocktail party and say, I did IPO and so on and so forth. But I tell you, the bank account's a lot better when you just keep cashing out.
But George, would you see this different if you were a sole proprietor versus a partnership where you had 2 other partners? Because this comes up, when you're going to sell a company, particularly, that you have different viewpoints of your partners. I mean, one partner may have a wife and 2 kids, and they've been working for 4 years, and they'd like to buy a house. And by the way, if you sell it, you can buy a house. Another partner may be a single entrepreneur, wants to roll the dice. After all, if we can't make $1 billion, what use is it to be in here? These are real conflicts, right?
No, absolutely. In fact, I'm right in the middle of that situation, and it's with a partner angel investor, where somebody put in a couple of $1 million to one of my current companies, and we've had an offer to be bought at $25 million, and I think it's way undervalued and not quite ready to sell. But if you're an angel investor, you put in a couple of million, you're going to triple or quadruple your money. You say, hey, George, why aren't you selling? So it absolutely gets very complex. But it's a nice problem to have. I love those problems.
But it's not as nice for us. So to be clear, one of the early conversations you should have among your co-founders or your partners are, what are your magic numbers? Are you in this to build a standalone company, or is there some number at which you say, look, if this number was put on the table for me personally, I'm done. you need to have that conversation among yourselves, because frankly, when you come to me, I'm going to have that conversation with you. I mean, if you want to take $5 million from me at a $10 million post, and you go out and sell it for $30 million, that's a pretty good outcome for many people, except for me, because I have a $280 million fund, and so turning $5 million into $15 million is not a great thing for the people who entrust their money to me. So I would advise two conversations. You're going to have the conversation among your co-founders about what are we doing this for? Are we trying to build a standalone company? Are we going for broke? Is there some number, let's be honest with each other, whereby we would actually sort of exit? So you understand it up front. And most VCs will, in a variety of ways, try to get that sense as well from you when they fund you, because they want to sort of understand if you're in it for a much bigger play or whether you're in it because there's some number by which, if I can take $5 million out of this thing, I'm done. There's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to be honest with your partners about it.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I went through the situation. I had a startup 6 months after my A round. I got $100 million offer. My board turned it down with my CEO. The company went then down. So
What year was that?
There?
What year was that?
It was Broadcom was the offer, and they were $2 billion then. They went to 140.
What year did this happen?
Oh, it's a long time ago, 10 years. So isn't there something that? So it's okay. I mean, the question is, can the investors of the board take one of the partners and just buy them out? Because the board turns down a $100 million offer, the person still has a mortgage and they still do. Why make it a win-lose thing when it could be a win-win? Because there's a bunch of people coming in at X dollars a share. There's an extra round of funding. Any comments on what can be done?
So occasionally, and I just saw a deal like this last fall, there's a deal where one of the partners wants to be bought out at a financing round.
The other doesn't.
Right.
Agrees.
Right. So let me just give you an example. It's there's a whole nother conversation around why VCs who are already in a deal don't buy their founders out typically. But if you're in the middle of a finance, so there was a financing round. This company was looking at its third round of financing, which is already a little late for me because I'm an early stage investor. But I really liked the company, and the problem was one of the founders wanted out. And the question was, how much of the incoming round was this founder going to take right off the table and leave in cash? The first red flag is, if I'm coming into the company at this price, why does a founder want out? Right? So my first question is, what does he know that I don't know, or what does she know that I don't know? Followed by, if I'm betting on a big upside here, and as Carl mentioned, 30 million doesn't move the needle for us, right? What's wrong with this picture? So it's an immediate flag. The second issue is that we don't want our capital, which is supposed to go into building the company, to go right into somebody's pocket. I mean, if they think that's the best use of the cash, then we already have a difference in opinion on what the future of the company is. The third issue is that there are later stage funds that do this, and they do it with some frequency, where they're literally providing a little bit of capital to the founders who've been living just by the skin of their teeth for a long time, and the stress has built up to the point of breaking, and they're going to put some amount of cash in to offset that. Usually those founders are staying in the company, and it's just really in exchange for some of their equity. The last issue is, most of the time founders own common stock, and I don't really have a lot of use for common stock, right? If they've got preferred stock, then that's interesting, but when I price it to buy it out, I immediately set a price on the options. And there's a whole legal issue with what that does to the stock price for everybody else in the company. So while these transactions can happen, they're pretty complex, and they're fraught with a whole series of legal issues designed not to let you take your stake and price it at one point, which doesn't reset the price for everybody else or for myself, not to mention the use of capital.
To that end, I would say, there was a period from about 97 to 2000 where this happened a lot, where there were offers that were turned down, sometimes that were billions, not just hundreds of millions. And I think that was a interesting period in time.
We both missed it.
Yeah, we did. Well, we're on the other side, which is okay.
We were on the operating side.
The point I would make is that we're involved with a company now where a similar situation has happened, and we got that offer, and we basically went to the founders and said, look, we think you can build a much bigger company. And they said, we're glad you think that, but this is our number. And we're selling the company. Because at the end of the day, it's very difficult if everyone who's coming into work and leaving work wants to do something to sort of force them into indentured servanthood. And so I think the environment has changed a little bit from the go-go sort of 97 to 2000 where everyone could go public in 18 months, all you have to do is just show up, to now where people are a little more realistic. And, if the founding team says, this is what we want to do, this is a great acquirer for us, we're going to have a much more success inside this acquire than as a standalone company. At some point, we investors listen because...
What if you split the difference? They have a person who's a founder, he has 10% of the company's got a $100 million offer, he still has a mortgage. He's worth $10 million on paper, but everybody else on the board has $1 billion in trust funds and don't care. They're doing it for glory.
Yeah.
So can't you just say 5%, we'll take it back? I know the legal issues very well. This is not hindsight. This is actually happening.
I think the question is you're talking about extremes of in or out. So the last venture round that we raised with eGreetings, Fred, we were oversubscribed. And we negotiated so Fred and I could sell part of our stake. And it was exactly what Professor Holloway said. It was the down payment on the house. Because, my wife had been in it for a long time. And, I told her 2 years, right? And, she believed it enough. And everyone was happy. So one of the investors got to have a larger stake than they were going to have carved out. Now, as Amanda said, it was common stock, not preferred, but they had enough preferred. And Freddie and I got a piece of liquidity that just was able to give us the freedom to settle in full time to really going after things. So,
it's actually a form of risk management. You think about it. The offer constitutes completely change of circumstances viewed by the founders. Right? They started, they had nothing to lose. Now they do.
It's a good example of how everybody gets locked into one scenario, right? I mean, you're really stuck with each other in these kinds of outcomes. And, I mean, Carl made the point that, or no, I guess George made the point that the purpose of taking venture financing is to offset some of your risk. The entrepreneur who doesn't realize that you just sold us your company and probably gave us some significant portion of control, because neither Carl or I or anybody else in the business invests without a big piece of control. You just woke up and found out who was actually in control. That being said, if the entire management team threatens to walk, right, and says, we're going to sell this company, the board is pretty helpless, because if the whole team walks out and is unified in saying, we're going to take the offer, it's very hard in most companies to say, I'm just going to rebuild the entire company. Nobody worry about it. So there's leverage in both sides of the equation.
Go ahead, Tony.
One of the things that I heard a VC say to me one time that has really stuck is, I'm not interested in running your company. So to Amanda's point, they need a management team.
And I guess one point to take away from this is that if you have a single proprietor, single major shareholder, founder, you're dealing with one risk preference. Mm-hmm. If you have two, you're dealing with two risk preferences, and the probability of these kinds of things coming up may be higher. I'll take you back to something that Tony said earlier, that is, it's important to sit down and have a conversation with your potential partner about all kinds of things. How long you're going to work during the day, and including risk preference. What's your number? What do you want to get out of this? And answers to those may drive the decision to go ahead with the partnership. Got a question up here.
Yeah. Do you have a sense that it is getting cheaper to fund software or internet companies now? I mean, I'm seeing all of these companies are now based on open source, which is free. You can now rent servers basically by the hour.
Let me see.
We're laughing because this is exactly the topic that we deal with almost every day.
I mean, for me, the question with the partnership is, I'm seeing the VC as a partner. So my question is, should I get into a partnership with the VC? I mean, it seems to me that the conditions in the market are really aligning in favor of the person with the strategy. And I don't know, have you seen that? Is it getting a kind of a problem? Which they say, I want to do this.
Oh boy. So I appreciate the fact that you see your VCs as partners, and and George, because he included his angels as partners, it warms my heart. Because so often we're the bad guy. When you go from cultural hero of being an entrepreneur to the VC, and the only good news is I have friends who are lawyers, so we're all kind of down there together. The challenge with it, yes. So there are certainly companies that are being founded on the backs of this data tone kind of environment now, and that is a big advantage to a certain class of startups. That being said, I know some VCs who have a real issue with companies outsourcing their back-end services into the cloud, so to speak. And I personally think it's a great advantage that companies should take advantage of. It depends on what the risk profile is of your customer base to have some major portion of your business running in someone else's infrastructure. That market is also still relatively nascent, and if you ask Amazon what their 5.9 availability is, you notice that they're not being specific. The other major factor in running your business on top of some of these services structures is that it turns out that the SLAs don't exist in a lot of these environments because they don't have to. They've priced it at a certain point where it's sort of a caveat emptor kind of use of the back end. So it depends on what kind of business you're building, and if you're sitting in your customer's revenue stream, you may find you don't survive the audit process there. A friend of mine's running IT at Facebook, right? And he said, we don't test, we just push it out. If it breaks, or we've got some issues, it's not the same thing as running mission critical enterprise software.
Sorry, to understand you correctly, so you think it's getting cheaper or not?
It is getting cheaper. The balancing act to that is it is taking companies a lot longer to get liquidity, right? So it's cheaper, but it's more expensive over time, because we're still holding companies in our portfolio 4, 5, 6, 7 years later that we should have been out of 3 or 4 years in, because to the point about the IPO market being closed, the stack of funded software companies is just going like this, right? There are 2,000 companies trying to find an exit at any given time in Silicon Valley, and the average exit for software companies is still $50 million. So it's one thing if you can build infrastructure and it only costs me $3 million a year to fund you instead of $6 million. But if it's $3 million times 7, that's still a problem, right? So there's some balancing factors in the overall cost of getting a company onto its feet. I'm still looking for an opportunity to try to get a company on its feet in the $20 million mark or less. And even with the opportunity to have services like you're talking about, and talent's getting less expensive with offshoring, there are a lot of things pushing the cost down that should be driving entrepreneurship up. We're still looking for those opportunities where we can find the transaction and exit in some time frame, because we're measured on IRR.
I think that our time is just about out. I hope that you've been listening, because there have been a lot of good points that have been made by our panel about why do you look for a partner, and what do you need in terms of complementarity, and importantly, what do you do prior to starting that partnership to make sure that you're going to be compatible, all the way from culture to risk preference. And then how do you keep this fresh? Tony mentioned going to dinner every week without your cell phone. These are important things to think about. Let's give our panel a hand. Thank you very much.